Hi, welcome back. I'm doing a Sunday reset video today. This idea, I've technically done this before, but it was more of a cleaning reset video. But this is something new that I am trying in my routine, which is making journaling catching up as part of a Sunday reset. And this idea was suggested by Jenna from Jen's Pens. Thank you so much for the idea and suggestion. I didn't think that I would be doing it this soon, but Sunday came up and I felt like I was in the mood to do a Sunday reset, so I figured I would just film it even though the process is not refined, because I feel like I want to show you how it evolves over time. So I'm just starting my morning, as always, with morning pages. Usually on Sundays, I don't actually do morning pages because my husband and I, we have a Sunday routine. So Sunday is usually the day that I actually skip morning pages, but he is overseas at the moment. So I do have time to write in my morning pages. It takes me about 30 minutes to an hour, depending on how cluttered my brain is and if there's anything I want to write about. Just quickly, because I did have a few questions on my reel and Instagram. People were wondering how I use the morning pages, what I write, and if I actually find it helpful. So I'm not sure how long I've been doing it now, but it feels like it's been 3 years now, I want to say. I do have an old journal that I could probably whip out. It definitely evolved over time. It just started off as daily journaling. And then I came across the term morning pages before I even read The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. But the concept was so fascinating to me that I researched a little bit more about it. And I remember now, around when I started was when I had my typewriter, because I decided that that was a great way to use my typewriter. It feels like a waste. I don't want it to be a paperweight. I actually want it to be functional. So I started writing morning pages on my typewriter every morning, which was such an experience, but I have moved recently. The typewriter's just been in storage for a few months. And because I had quite a few notebooks to use up, I decided to move to writing my morning pages in a journal. And I still have a bunch of pens to use up as well. Actually, I don't have too many pens to use up. It's just the colored pens left, but I've made really, really good progress on my notebooks and pens because of my morning pages. So I write 2 A5-ish sized pages a day. That's what works for me. I initially started with 3, but then I felt like it took me a little bit too long to write, and I didn't want to spend so much of my morning just writing, struggling to find something. So there are some mornings where I can just write continuously because there's just so much on my mind, or there's a lot of things that I want to process. I don't really go in with a plan, and the root of morning pages is different for everyone, but at the root of it for me is that it's not pretty. It's not something I meant to ever look back on. It's not something that's really meant to make sense. It's not poetry. It's not beautiful writing at all. It's just a way for me to clean my mind. And so when people ask, do morning pages actually work for you? For me personally, yes, it has been incredible. One of the best things I've ever added to my routine, to my life, because for me, I know it doesn't work for everyone, and some people have mentioned that it makes them more negative. So it comes down to what kind of person you are, and whether you're the type to really ruminate and just go down a rabbit hole, a spiral of negative thoughts. I am like that normally without my morning pages, so I tend to overthink a lot. But the way morning pages really helps me is to get things out of my mind and onto paper, because as soon as I write it down, I feel like I don't even think about it anymore. And the reason why this is so helpful for me at the beginning of each day is because it's like cleaning my mind. It's clearing my mind from all of the gunk that built up over the past day, and so I can start my day fresh with a clean slate, and I feel like I'm able to approach my work with so much more clarity and calm because I'm not carrying around all of these thoughts in my brain. A typical morning pages could be just me writing, I'm stressed, these are the tasks that I need to do, I think I'm going to do this one first. So sometimes it's me working out my day and working out my to-do list. So I used to do my morning pages with a cup of coffee, and that was just such a nice morning ritual. It's probably been about 3 months now, so it's become quite a bit of a habit. I now have a glass of water when I do my morning pages, and then I go and make coffee and then start my day. So the coffee is a way to mark the day beginning for me, my work day beginning, and it's just It felt a little bit wasteful to have it while I was having morning pages because I was so involved in writing that often I wasn't able to savor the taste of my coffee. So I wanted to split up those two different experiences, and that just worked for me. I know that sounds extremely extra, but it was a way for me to drink more water because I'm very bad with drinking water. I'm a lot better now because I have a water tracker on my watch which pings me to drink more water, but I would honestly go a whole day with like barely drinking a single cup of water. So now it's my rule that I start the day with a warm cup of water, usually, before I drink my coffee. I am now painfully stamping out the words Sunday Reset in my messy book journal. I love these little stamps, but they give me such a headache. They're just so small and so annoying to use, but it just looks so pretty. Today's Sunday Reset will look a little bit like my last journal catch-up video because that's how this reset day kind of evolved, because I wanted a dedicated day a week so I could be more consistent with catching up on my journals. And today will look a little bit more intense than I think future Sunday resets will be because I have a bit to catch up on. It won't always look like this, but today is not just about my journals. Sunday resets, like I mentioned, are where I clean up the studio as well. It's where I take care of admin tasks and I give myself a little bit of a day off because I have had the tendency to start working on Sundays, which is not a good thing. I really want to take at least one day off a week to reset, recharge, reevaluate, just to take a breather from everything because it's so easy to keep working. So there are two tasks on here that I have been putting off for a long time. One of those things is decluttering my studio desk. Ever since I did a Sydney market in late November last year, my studio's just been a mess because when you're restocking stickers and you're just cutting and printing everything, there's just scrap paper everywhere. I have second stickers everywhere and I need to put things back in their place. And the problem is that I don't really have a place for everything. So I was working on just making sure I've developed a system so everything has a place. Every tiny little thing has a place. And so I'm going to continue working on that. But that's one of the reasons why keeping my desk tidy is so difficult for me because I don't have a place to put things and I just have a lot of unfinished projects lying around and I think that I'm going to get back to it later that day. But that day turns into maybe like next week, and so I've just got things sitting on my desk for a whole week where I should really just wrap it up, put it away somewhere nicely that I can come back to a week later. It doesn't make sense to leave it all out. The other thing that I've been putting off for a while is updating my inventory system on Squarespace. So I, for the longest time, have just been doing a manual inventory system and I don't have a inventory count because I can just restock at any time for most things. It's a little bit different now with washi tapes because I actually get that outsourced. It eventually got to the point where I was playing catch up with my inventory system and there were things that went out of stock, but I didn't know it was out of stock until an order came in. So it was just slowing down my order packing process. So I really wanted to improve that and I focused a lot on that in November and December. But I finally decided to add that to the Sunday Reset list today as a task that's been long overdue, a task that I've been putting off for weeks. In the future, I would like to do a bit more of a monthly reset rather than a Sunday reset because I think the Sundays will get very repetitive. I think recapping the month and planning for the month ahead is just a little bit more interesting to watch. And then it's just the one video a month. And then I've just got a few other tasks like catch up on the life archives because I still have so many pages I need to write. Eventually I will catch up with that so there'll be a lot less to write every week. And then also to catch up on my weekly and monthly highlights book, which is something I'm not particularly enjoying because there's a lot of overlap and I'm writing things like 3 times right now because I'm trying to use up these books, but we are getting there. The weekly is going to be done in April, so just a few more months of sticking this out and it will be done. Okay, I know I'm talking a lot, so we're going to cut to music very, very soon, I promise, but here I'm just numbering tasks, like I'm prioritizing them so I know what to start with and what I should do next. This way I don't have to make that decision later. It just makes it a lot easier for my brain later. I'm starting with the semi-hard task so that I can't put it off because it is a priority, which is to update my inventory system. And then I'm going to do a tiny bit of work, which is to print the January sticker club from my Patreon and cut that so I can take a photo of it and post it to Instagram later today. And then I will declutter my desk. So those are the 3 tasks that I'm starting with, because I know if I start with just catching up on journaling, everything will just be pushed off. And that's like a reward. That's like a nice thing to do. So I want to save that reward for when I've tackled the difficult tasks first, because I know I don't want to declutter my studio. So I should do that first and then reward myself with some journaling. All right, now begins my very boring and tedious task of counting every single sticker sheet and updating this quantity in the back end of my Squarespace website. This is not going to be very fun to watch, so I'm going to speed this up, but all up, it took just under 1 hour, so that's not too bad. That's not too bad for a task that I have put off for weeks. In my defense, these sticker sheets were a mess also because of the markets, because when I pack up, I just put everything back in that box. I'm not trying to sort it into envelopes into the right place. In the next Sunday reset, eventually I'm going to create little tabs for each of the envelopes so that's easier to see what sticker design is in each envelope. I don't have to search inside the envelope to see it. I can see at a glance what sticker sheet that I'm looking for, but I didn't want to overload myself today because I was already doing a task that I've been putting off. So I'm going to do that labeling in another Sunday reset or monthly reset. So I'm just focusing on the inventory and the counting for now. And now we're going to take a little music break so you have a little bit of a rest from my incessant talking, but I will be back soon. The next task on my Sunday reset list is to print the January sticker club. It's a little bit late, like the 14th of January when I filmed this, and I'm only printing this out and posting it to Instagram now, but that is a work in progress. There's not really much I want to talk about this because it's pretty self-explanatory, so I just want to talk a little bit more about Sunday resets and how they came about for me. I don't want people to think that I've always been this like super organized person that always keeps my space clean. That's complete opposite of the truth, and the the reason why I have these Sunday resets is because I have a very natural tendency to be very messy and cluttered and just continue working through the mess. And the reason why I gravitated towards this idea of a Sunday reset was because I felt that there were a lot of tasks that built up, and I found that it was much easier to manage tasks when you consistently took care of it rather than letting it accumulate. And so if it seems like I'm very rigid with my systems and routines, it's because I feel like I need it, or I just like collapse into disarray and mess and chaos. And so it's my way of countering my chaotic brain. So basically, I'm trying to say I am not this naturally organized. Well, I feel like I am now because it's become a habit and it's something that you can, I think, teach yourself. But growing up, I definitely wasn't very organized. I'm very last minute with assessments. And I always got things done. I was always fairly productive, but I was never tidy. I always had a really, really messy space. I used to be like a shopaholic, recovering hoarder. And so that's why I am so passionate about using things up now, because I'm trying to undo all of these bad habits that I learnt when I was younger. And I think I mentioned earlier, but the Sunday resets came about because I wanted a system, like a routine for cleaning up the house. That was another thing that I really, really struggled with. Like I always, my whole life, felt like I struggled with really tiny tasks, like really ordinary, everyday tasks that I just could never find the time for. I felt like I just couldn't work it into my schedule. So things like doing the dishes, vacuuming, changing bed sheets, cleaning the bathroom, all those little things I found really stressful and really overwhelming. Like I would dread the thought of doing them. And eventually, after a few years, I was fed up. Like I was kind of just treading water, but I really wanted to get a grasp on it. Like I really aspired to having a clean, minimal, tidy home. But I think in the past 2 years, once I really worked on developing a system and routine and started doing Sunday resets, it's funny because it's a fairly new concept for me and my husband. Like I think we only started doing it 2 years ago, but now it's become so ingrained in our routine that he actually cannot remember not ever doing it. So that's the power of routine. Like I am fighting against my natural tendencies, my natural inclination to just be messy and chaotic, and I would much rather work on the creative things and plan rather than do ordinary housework things or admin things or just cleaning. So I just wanted to share that it did take me a while to get to this point, and this is the result of me trying to fix that messy side of myself. Like I still have a long way to go, but I really love the idea of systems and habits, and that's probably more of an unplanned podcast episode. So that's kind of the background context, the background story of why I am such an avid journaler and planner, because I think without these systems and without these routines, there's no way I would get done as much as I do. And yes, I do admit that part of it is just who I am as a person. I'm a very type 1, type A person, but I am saying that if I didn't have these systems, if I didn't have these routines, things would look very, very different. And I want to encourage you to get inspired by other people's routines, but don't take it as the be all end all. Like find your routine, find your system that works for you, because it should absolutely be catered to your individual life and your goals. I am now moving on to the last unpleasant task for the Sunday reset, which is to declutter the studio. It's going to be unpleasant, but it's going to be a huge relief, and that's what's motivating me to push through. But after this, the light at the end of the tunnel is that I can finally catch up on some journals. And I'm just watching a journaling video while I'm decluttering. I definitely like to listen to something while I'm cleaning or doing like household chores. So it's usually just a YouTube video, and I just don't watch the video at all. I just like to listen to people talk about their journals and planners, or I'll have a podcast episode on. The only thing that I really want to say about this is, again, the decluttering process that I'm showing here is me just trying to find a place for everything, because I realized that all the mess that accumulated and built up was because I didn't have dedicated places for things. And this is what it looks like now. There's still a little bit of clutter, but compared to what it looked like when I started, that is a huge improvement. So now finally, I have earned the right to journal. I am going to start with my weekly and monthly highlights first, and then I'm going to catch up on my life archives. And then the remaining tasks after that are doing my bookkeeping and then working on the notes for my Patreon Unplanned Podcast episode if I have time. Again, this part is very similar to my journal catch-up, so it might be a little bit boring. So I'm going to speed this up, put on some music, and then I will come back and chat a little bit more about my planners. So like I mentioned, I am being a little bit repetitive with these journals because I am trying to use up the Muji ones, which is the bigger one on top, and then the Midori One Day One Page also has a month spread. It's kind of nice to have those daily highlights and then also the monthly highlights at the beginning so that it's just like the entire year of highlights in this one book. But again, unfortunately, I do have the other Muji spread to use up, so I'm writing it twice, and I've got to say, I definitely prefer the smaller month spread. Even though it is so tiny, it just looks so cute, and I like the lack of white space. Like, I like how cluttered it looks when it's just full of writing. I don't know if you can hear the like white noise in the background, but it just started raining quite hard outside, so that's what that noise is. I don't tend to use too many stickers or decorations on my month spreads because I am gravitating towards just the look of writing and very, very simple stickers. I think for me, my brain just gets a little bit overwhelmed when there's too much color or too much decoration going on, so I really like PET tape for this. Maddie from Hello Naya sent me a bunch of PET tape, which has been like amazing. She totally converted me. But yeah, I usually just decorate my month spread with just 1 or 2 stickers, very simple stickers. I love seeing other people's spreads where they just have so much going on in their monthly spread and just looks so happy and cute. But I feel like I would stress myself out if that was in my own planner. I have finally reached the point of being able to update my life archives. This is what the entire Sunday reset hinged on. This is all I want to do, just write in my life archives. I know it's a bit of a unnecessary name, but I really like the name of it. I guess it's just an archives book, just a typical diary memory keeping thing, but I like the idea of archiving your life and just putting little memories in there. So I don't know if you can see the date in the bottom right, but it says 30th of November. And again, I was recording this on the 14th of January. So I am very behind. I'm still catching up, but this journal is getting better and better for me. I really, really enjoy writing in this journal. And at first, when I started this journal, I thought it would just be photos, no decorations, just keeping it really, really simple. But I realized that I didn't really have a place for junk journaling anymore, or just layering things. I love using craft paper, book pages, washi tape, all of that stuff. And I didn't really have a place for that anymore that would make sense. So I've been slowly incorporating it into this journal and have been loving it. I've realized that the one thing that stops me from staying up to date with this journal is that I wait until I have the photos before I write, which does not work because then it takes me a while to print out the photos because I wait until I have enough photos to print out on a piece of paper. Someone in the comments asked me, sorry, I forgot who it was, but they asked how I printed my photos, and I just printed on scrap pieces of paper. So I hoard paper, like whether it's delivery invoices from orders, sometimes junk mail that you get when they only print on one side. I hoard all of that so that I can print on the back of it, and it works really well. And I don't have to fill up the entire page, but I try to do, like, how do I describe this? Like a complete row. So there's not like a random cutout on the page so that I can keep using the page because it's an A4 page. And as I'm really explaining this terribly, but I'll cut off that row of photos and then I'll use it again, but just print it as an A4 page and just print another 2 rows. So I print about, this is making no sense, like a third or sometimes a half. Like I'll print an A5, God, let me start over. I'll just use enough photos to fill up about A5 every time, a third to A5, so that I can just trim the paper and reuse it for next time. There's no waste on it. But like I said, because I wait until I have enough photos to print out, which usually takes about a week to 2 weeks, I delay on the writing. But what I've been doing recently that has worked really well is just I always have a spare photo that needs to be stuck in. I might just like cut this out of cardboard next time as a template, but then line that up on the page where I want to put it and just write around it. I just use a placeholder image so that I can still write and get my thoughts out, but stick in the image later. It's not a perfect solution because then I can't really decorate the page because I am waiting for the photo, but it is a way for me to not wait until I have the photo to journal, if that makes sense. I don't know if this is such an obscure problem that no one else has, but sometimes I just want to write about the memory, even if I don't have the photo first. Yeah, that makes sense, right? That's a very common issue, I'm sure. I would have liked to keep writing, but there was still a lot I had to do, so I had to force myself to stop so that I could get on with the other tasks. Otherwise, I would be just writing all night. So the next task, which is probably very boring to watch because I can't really show you anything, I do share my finances with my workshop patrons. So if you are starting up a business or you are still very new to the business journey and you're curious about all the ins and outs of my business and how I run it and what I make, then that workshop tier is where I share my finances every month. And I think I've mentioned my routine, but I can't remember when I would have talked about it. But for my bookkeeping, I like to record, how do I explain this? Let me gather my thoughts. So I mostly expense track. That's the main thing I need to do because income can be fairly easily tracked through the payment providers that I use, like PayPal, Patreon, Stripe, for example. I can gather that data digitally so I don't have to actually track it. But expenses is a hard one because when it comes to tax time, I do not want to have to sort through a year's worth of expenses. Like, I want to make sure I'm on top of it, so I'm claiming it. I'm claiming the relevant business expenses. So currently, what works for me is recording the expense in my daily planner. That's just the easiest, quickest way for me to note it down. and then I write it like a task so that when I have consolidated, reconciled my expenses, I can tick that off. So I only write it down in my daily planner, so I have a quick reference list. I can easily flip back and see what expenses I had for the day. I do forget some days. I'm trying to work on it, like trying to just write it down immediately as the expense happens. But then what I like to do is transfer it to Notion. I can add the type of expense that it is. I have it all in a table. I can add it up. I can filter by month, etc. It's just a little bit nicer for me to use than Google Sheets, and I always have Notion open already. I have this giant book in front of me. It's not that giant. It's A4. That was dramatic. But I have this book in front of me because I am trying to use up this book. So what I've been doing is, it's not very efficient, but I'm also expense tracking in this book. And so I just have a page for the month. I write down the date, the item, and the amount. And then at the end of the month, I highlight each of the different categories and sum it up. Again, not necessary because I can technically do this in Notion, but I'm trying to use up this book, but also develop a better system around money and tracking. And I think this way of writing just really slows me down. But the ideal routine would just be logging it in my daily planner and then adding it to Notion. So I took a break to have some dinner. I'm showing you my glass of red wine here. But my very last task for the day is to work on the notes for the Patreon video for the Unplanned podcast episode. I've been talking a lot. Hopefully you're not sick of the talking yet, but I wanted to mention my reasoning behind writing the notes in the book versus digitally. I don't know if anyone cares about that, but that was a conflict that I had. So I am a Notion fan. Again, no surprise, I keep mentioning it. I love the layout of it. I love how easily it can be customized. I love Notion. It is my second brain. And in terms of storing notes and planning ahead for products like shop updates, it's amazing on there. It's so easy to quickly reference, to search back. And so I usually plan out content, like content for videos. What am I saying? Like notes for videos. I normally write that in Notion, because it just makes sense to write it digitally. But what I have realized recently is that it's just more fun to write it by hand in my book. And while my brain, my logical side, is screaming at me saying, this is not logical, it makes no sense, you should be typing this out, there is a difference in writing it out by hand. And I actually have this article in my commonplace book. But the process of writing it by hand is much slower than typing it out. And so it does force your brain to not only dwell on the content a little bit more, it also helps you to absorb the information and to remember the information. So in that sense, it kind of makes sense to write it out so that you can remember what it is you're writing. But really, my reasoning for doing that is just because it's just so much fun to write rather than type. I do love typing too, but it's just a different experience. Anyway, I don't have to justify that because I'm sure everyone here watching understands the love for writing and journaling. But my main fear with writing it by hand versus typing it is that it would be all over the place. The structure would be all over the place. But I guess that's not really the worst thing. And what I found after doing these notes is that my brain was thinking of more things. I wasn't worrying about self-editing. I wasn't trying to move things around. I was just writing. And that is a big writing tip. And that's what I used to tell the students that I used to tutor, was that you don't want to edit as you write, especially when it's creative. When you're just trying to get the ideas out on the page, you just need to write. Don't get caught up in the self-editing process because that will halt your momentum. That'll stop and hinder your creativity. So for that reason as well, writing by hand is actually really excellent because I'm just focusing on getting the next idea out of my brain rather than thinking like, oh, does this go under this category? Should I move this around? Should I say this first? So yes, all that to say, I really, really, really enjoyed writing this out by hand, and I was dreading doing the notes a little bit because it's just that perfectionist tendency of like, oh, I need it to be perfect. I don't want to miss any information, but doing it by hand like this, I sound like a broken record. It was just a really lovely process is what I was trying to say. And it was a really nice way to end the day. It was doing a tiny bit of work, but it was a way to do a bit more writing as well. And this is in my messy book, my messy commonplace whatever book. I just put random lists in here. Like I showed you, the Sunday reset list was in here, and I was losing some serious light. So this is where I'm going to end the video. I want to say thank you so much for watching. I have no idea how videos are going to be received still after all this time. So like, I hope you didn't hate it. I hope some of you liked it, but for me, it was really, really fun to record this. The entire day was just like really fun and satisfying for me to be able to tick off these 2 things that were on my list for a while. And it was exactly how I want my Sundays to feel. Like I'm resetting the week and I'm planning for the week ahead. It was the perfect Sunday reset. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope you were able to do a little bit of journaling or work while watching this, but I look forward to doing monthly reset videos in the future. But again, that is all for me. Thank you so much for watching and resetting with me. Bye.